All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode of London is Blue podcast. As always, your host, Brandon, my co-host, Nick and Dan. Gentlemen, we have the Preston North End match review. Our entry into the FA Cup, Nick, is off and running. A second domestic trophy on the line. How are we doing?
Good. Yeah, I mean, this is, in a year where you don't have any European football to speak of, these cup competitions feel more important and more special than maybe they have in a little bit of time. You know, I think obviously when you're in Europe, the Champions League takes precedent in your whole thoughts and feelings. But I think Chelsea have a huge opportunity in both cups this year to get back to some winning ways, to lift some silverware. And nice, I like the third round of the FA Cup a lot, Dan, because it does give you the giant killer moments, and we saw that with, I think, Maidstone yesterday, and Wrexham beating Shrewsbury, and this is always a fun round to go through and look at the results of, and you're like, oh man, maybe you can play a League Two opposition in the fourth round. Who knows?
Maximum chaos to start the new year. That is exactly what we got in this round, though a lot of Premier League teams were able to get it across the line. Not necessarily all as good as the way that Chelsea did, at least in the second half, though, Brandon. So ultimately, there were a couple 1-0 wins for teams like Aston Villa that, I'm sure they appreciated. But it was just, we phoned it in. We did the group project at the last couple minutes of it. We got it done. We got a good grade, and we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, we're all about completion, right? If we're taking everything as pass fail, we'd be in a good spot right now. So obviously we've got a lot to break in on this one. We'll get into it definitely. But I always love these matches when I think it's easy to do the 3-word match review when it's an established team, a Premier League team. We know them. We have history, context. Preston North End. Bit of a challenging match. Like, let's see what the people had, Dan. This is pretty interesting.
Megan with second half sparkles. Matt with we scored headers. Yes, very true. Chris with the still checking offside because boy, oh boy, that was quite the long check for a pretty obvious onside.
3 hours later.
Exactly. Bones with the hold the criticism and a bunch of exclamation points. Blueco International. I don't think this is the official account, Nick, but they tagged you directly with the 1/2 wonders.
That was my favorite of the whole bunch. It was so good.
Jesper with the Bing X era incoming. That's right. A little new sponsor momentum. And then Ollie with, I think what was most important, in the hat. That's all I need to be, in the hat.
Is that why you're wearing a hat today, Dan?
Yes, in honor of the fact that we are in the hat.
So, look, there's a lot there, right? Because we don't have the traditional kind of getting stuck in. I watched back the ESPN highlights because they have the rights for it. And the Enzo goal, they showed it. They didn't show it was a VAR, and they just went to another clip, and all of a sudden I missed that actually went from 3-0 to 4-0. Like, as I was watching it. Anyways, more on ESPN coming, but just lowest bar possible for them to cross. I put lower division struggles. Nick, I feel like you played baseball. Am I right?
Oh yeah.
You ever get to that situation, or we've seen it like in MLB where they have to put like an outfielder to pitch and he's just lobbing in meatballs, but yeah. the batter struggles because they're used to seeing 80, 90 mile an hour pitches. This is like what it was. Like, they're in the championship mid-table, but like we struggled with the lower division style and pace, no doubt.
Yeah.
Funniest. Anyway, so I went lower division struggles. What about you?
Crossing can work as a theory. We don't have to walk it into the back of the fucking net all the time. Like, big, tall striker, ball in, header. Hooray.
Well, Broya, big body. That helps.
Or as Kieran Gibbs would call him, the big lad up top. So there you go.
What about you, Dan?
Advancing was everything. I think there's a lot. Look, the criticism, I think, actually is exactly right. We just need to advance. Just get winning. Just become a team that wins. Like, I don't care if it's pretty. I don't care if it's ugly. Like, just win. Just win. So advancing was everything. Got it done.
Absolutely. Well, we obviously want to shout out everybody in our community, Nick. We always appreciate the 5 stars and so many different things we got rolling these days.
Yeah, look, guys, obviously you make this show. We have some really important announcements coming your way. We've teased you for 3 or 4 years now about these, but that's going to happen very soon, promise. And to do that and be around for that, hit us with a 5-star. Give us a little bit of love on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. We're going to be hopefully doing a lot more on YouTube in the future here. If you do want to join the Dispatch, Sam is cranking out some really great newsletters every single week. This past week was particularly important as you look ahead to the rest of the month. And then, of course, if you want a kind of deeper connection, our Discord community is out there. If you want to chip in a few bucks and support the pod that way. So lots of ways you can do it. Many of them are free. And look, we have Dan and I just did the pod schedule coming up that we'll talk about. It's 5 pod weeks from here until the rest of the year, basically, looks like.
Packed. It is a packed podcast calendar ahead.
All right, get involved plenty of ways, but let's jump into the meat of this one. It was Preston North End this past Saturday, the 6th of January in 2024. I don't know about you, but I've wrote the year about 3 times already. And it was the FA Cup at Stamford Bridge. In case you missed it, Chelsea 4, Preston 0. Scoring 50th minute. We had to wait a little bit. All right, a little bit. Broya, though, getting the flick on header to the back post. 66th minute, Thiago Silva rising high like a young spring chicken. 69th minute, Sterling. And then last but certainly not least, Enzo in the 85th minute. So, Dan, run us through the lineup.
Look, it was a big George between the sticks. I feel like this was a George performance, so we'll go with it. It was out. It doesn't have the lineup exactly correct because it was Malo Gusto, Levi Colwell, Axel Disasi, and Alfie Gilchrist as your back 4. Enzo Fernandez, Moises Caicedo as your midfield pairing, Mykhailo Mudryk, Cole Palmer, Raheem Sterling, and Armando Broya as your attackers on the day. And again, Pochettino saying 5 subs? No problem. I got you. Got all 5 out in this one as well. He had Thiago Silva come on for Gilchrist, Nani Madueke coming for Mykhailo Mudryk. That was in the 61st minute. It was another double change in the 76th minute with Conor Gallagher coming in for Cole Palmer and Davide Washington coming in for Armando Broya. That's right, O Presidente. And then Michael Golding coming in to get a Cobham appearance right there in the 89th minute for Enzo Fernandez. So
full debut, baby. Let's go.
We love a debut. We love a debut here.
17 years young, more to come on that. So Chelsea had 70% ball possession. We had 24 shots, 12 on target. We had, 7 big chances, 6 missed, hit the woodwork once. Only 1 counterattack, which really, are we that surprised? Probably not. And then 2 saves for Petrovic on the day. The XG, thanks to @XG Philosophy, was Chelsea 4.35 to Preston's 0.44. Dominant, to say the least. And then our one random stat from Opta Joe's, too, after just one of his first 168 goals in English club football had come from such a position. Raheem Sterling's last 2 goals for Chelsea have both come from a direct free kick, a little bit of a quirk. All right, Nick, you normally do your MPET shithouse mode of the match. You weren't going to do it, but I had to remind you that you got shithoused yourself a little bit on social media yesterday.
Well, look, new year, new me. Everyone knows that I'm turning over a new leaf, softer side coming out. But first, there's been a few tweets out there. Everyone doing the flying high at 39 years old. Bleacher Report looking at you on that one. Thank you for the copy, although I did have LeBron James in mind, so I feel pretty good about where I'm at with those two excelling in their respective crafts with Silva and LeBron James. But look, I'm doing this one time, and then we're going to get back to the shithouse the rest of the year. The best thing I saw, instead of the shithouse moment of the match, the Gianluca Vialli tributes that happened before the match today were fantastic. I mean, it's obviously hard to believe that it's been a year already, and it's, I think you kind of remember back to that time last year, which was in the midst of a lot of chaos at the club and a lot of turnover and all that sort of stuff. And that was kind of a point where I think everyone came together again and rallied around Vialli and remembered his contributions to the club. And it really. I think you struggle to find someone who's maybe more universally loved for what he did during that time, and so just a massive respect to him, and still thoughts with his family, and great job to everyone who put the banners together in the stadium and who did the Vialli chants, and I think FA Cup in particular is a really great occasion to do that in. So look, we're back with Shithouse next week, but for right now, that was fantastic.
All right. Well, with that being said, we're going to take our first ad break. When we get back, all about the results. So thank you to sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right. A return to the FA Cup. For those of you that don't know, FA Cup, top of the pyramid of football, down to the bottom, the lower divisions play, and now the big leagues, in quotes, jump in at this point in time. Whereas the Carabao Cup, we get in a little bit earlier. So FA Cup, a lot of tradition here, gentlemen. A lot of history with this one. And it was a friendly draw. Dan, I just think back to a year ago when we got Man City double draw in the domestic cups. I don't feel bad for Arsenal-Liverpool playing, right? I'm like, about time we get back to normalcy playing a smaller division team. And it's championship, so it's not like we're playing, the North Central Conference or something like that. Like, we're in it. And we haven't played Preston. We haven't seen them in over a decade either, have we?
Well, this is a more commonly played team, in the 19, that's right, you got to start with a 1-9, not a 2-0. The 1910s, 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Like, we have to go back a little bit before any of us on this pod were alive and walking this earth. To
even you,
talk
Dan?
about, even me, that's
even
right.
You? Okay.
Even me. But the kind of lifetime in between the two sides, 32 wins, 17 draws, 26 losses. But the last loss that we actually had to them was in 1981 when we actually were both playing in League Two at the time. It was a 1-0 loss away. And first time we played them since 2010, which was also an FA Cup match. So 14 years. It was a 2-0 away win. And yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you'd expect. It's a side that wants to come in. They want to play big. They want an opportunity to try to upset. That's what the FA Cup and these tournaments are all about, is playing the role of spoiler.
The magic of the FA Cup.
Yeah, it's the magic of the FA Cup. It's a fun thing. And to Brandon's point, absolutely deserved a little bit of draw benefit from the gods of football so that we could potentially at least advance into some deeper rounds. I mean, we got the luck with the Middlesbrough draw heading into the Carabao Cup semifinals. Let's get a little bit more luck this Monday when we get our draw against hopefully another side that should be easy pickings, Nick, for this Chelsea team.
Yeah, look, I mean, this fixture is something that Chelsea just move through typically. I mean, third round of the FA Cup is just something that we typically do better in. Like, obviously last year you had the unfortunate circumstances of playing Man City in both the League Cup and the FA Cup. And of course, at that time we were playing like shit and didn't advance. But typically this phase, we've actually been to a third round FA Cup game, I think twice, for January trips. And we've been over there. It's a lot of fun. I think it's right after the holidays. There's still kind of a good atmosphere around, and it's the opportunity to play someone new. And this was, and we're kind of thinking about Preston North End. Like, yeah, they're in the championship. They're not likely to be promoted, so it's not like we would be kind of destined to see them next year. But I think the importance this year is that we advance as far as we can in the tournament. And there are already some teams like Arsenal who will not be advancing in this year's tournament. And so you do have an opportunity potentially to go a little bit further and see what you can do. And yeah, eventually you're going to play, the big Premier League squads because most of those typically advance. But I think it's incredibly important to take this seriously and to advance as far as we can because it's more matches. It's a chance to see as many players as we have in this squad, assuming that some of them come back healthy at some point, Brandon. And it's silverware, and we gotta get back to winning silverware.
Yeah, the League Cup, Carabao Cup, we always have been talking about this season as like the statement piece. The FA Cup would be an even bigger trophy to win, an even bigger statement. So of course it's great to get off and running. And also from Preston North End's perspective, they only made 2 changes personnel-wise from their last championship match against Sunderland. So this was pretty much full strength for them. The big change from them, no surprise, they went from a 4-1-4-1 to a back 5, right? They played essentially a 5-4-1 in attack, however you want to kind of split that there. So no surprise there, but like they went for it. But what was different about this one is it was a big day for Cobham, which you always love to see when there's chances to embed these players in, young players, especially because we had injuries even more. And the excitement was Alfie Gilchrist getting the start. It was his first senior start for Alfie. We've seen all the hype videos, and the photo of him underneath the JT banner was iconic. No pressure, kid. But again, it was just, you love to see it. Those are things that warm the heart and you want to see. So Alfie got to play. Was it an earth-changing performance? No, but that's okay. Didn't cost us, got 60 minutes, Dan, and he had some pretty good stats along the way against the championship team, which I think Phil at Chelsea Youth would argue a lot of these players are at least at that level.
100% tackles won, 100% dribbles completed, 94% pass accuracy, 79 touches, 62 of 66 passes completed, 2 of 3 long balls, 2 of 2 ground duels, and 2 clearances. I would say it's a pretty good stat line. Also, I mean, if you think about the first half of the match to the second half, again, he didn't get the full day out, right? Thiago Silva comes in to replace him partway through the match around the 61st minute. So, I mean, it's an opportunity for him to get out, to stretch his legs, to test himself a bit, and, you know, looked comfortable in the side. Didn't look like he was having much of an issue. Again, if you think about maybe the first half, though, I mean, we only faced 2 total shots, 2 on target. It was not a whole lot for him to do. But, I mean, when you don't have necessarily when you have a lot of the ball, being comfortable, being composed, being able to look the part, I think Nick is just about as important as maybe, like, not making a mistake. Like, I think that, like, the fact that it was a mistake-free football is actually probably the thing I'm happier about, given the competition Alfie and the team were up against.
He was our best player in the first half. I mean, and that is more of an indictment on the rest of the team than it is on him being great. But he was the only one not making mistakes. Everyone else was just not up to it in the first half, and so I was really happy for him. I was kind of surprised he didn't go the distance, if I'm being completely candid. But with the way that we were setting up, I mean, everyone was so pressed forward that it was basically the fullbacks and Caicedo. So Gilchrist, Gusto, and Caicedo, who were basically there to stop the counterattacking that Preston were doing. And I thought there were plenty of opportunities when they would spray the ball out wide to his side where he had to go one-on-one and acquitted himself well, or at least did enough to let Disasi come in and help him, right? Which is, I think, part of the job, Brandon, that he has and that all the young guys have is like when to know when your help is there and how to shepherd someone into an area where they're going to make, you know, potentially a mistake or put the ball out of play or something like that too. And so, you know, I think he acquitted himself very well. Again, you know, this is Preston. We can't get too far ahead of ourselves, but could he be a legitimate presence in this team, especially if we're going to continue to have injuries at fullback? Could he come in for 30 minutes or close out a match like he has been doing regularly? Yeah, I think so.
Especially on that right side. You know, it sounds like Trevoh Chalobah is going to be leaving Chelsea. I mean, he hasn't featured at all. Can't get healthy, though, so some issues there. This is one of those opportunities where, is it his natural position? No. But look at the commitment level from him. He will play anywhere, and he would play in goal if that's what Poch needed him to do. And I think that's what you're going to get. This is what we hear from Phil all the time. You know, Lewis Hall was a 6 or an 8 for the academy dev squad, but then he'd come into the Premier League and then first team and play left back and do it well. So actually think this is better for Alfie because he doesn't have the height profile of a center back. And that's okay. This is an opportunity, and that's what you want to see. Mistake-free football. He's starting to get some taste for it, starting to check the boxes, get acclimated to it, and I think that is good. So, again, no bad things with his performance, and that's great. Didn't need to be man of the match. You're right back. That's okay. Put in a solid shift, which he did. But I tell you what, the big cameo was coming from Michael Golding. 17 years young. Out of nowhere. Could have almost scored if he would have gotten his feet set a little bit better, Nick.
That would have been amazing.
But, like, you love hearing the crowd roar because Chelsea fans love the academy. Not that other teams don't, but we've had such a great relationship with the academy, even though a lot of players haven't always made it. But a 17-year-old plucked into this match and got involved centrally is a huge, I feel like, a trust statement from Poch.
I was going to say this, if you look at the fact, too, that he only has 2 matches played at PL2. Like that is the, like, when you look at his FB ref profile, it's like, okay, yeah, the dude does not have minutes beyond like a certain level of football, and like this is a massive step up.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity for him. I think on a day where Chelsea were as comfortable as you could be with the performance that we put in, 2-3-0 up. My only question is, why didn't we see him kind of enter the fray sooner? I mean, it's not as if Preston were a huge goal threat. You read the stats earlier, Brandon. I mean, they offered very little to the game, 4 total shots, 2 on target. So, in a world where, Enzo's still nursing a hernia injury and Caicedo's clearly running on fumes and all that sort of stuff, like, it's more of a chance, I think, for these guys to get involved because of the injury situation, right? I mean, if Alex Matos was still here, he'd be playing, right, in a match like this. And so I'm hugely impressed that he was able to come on, especially given the lack of experience at kind of the PL2 level that Dan just mentioned. But he's also, like, from a size profile, looks big for a 17-year-old. I mean, he looks like his body is kind of already in a shape to potentially make it at a bigger kind of level. And so maybe he gets another chance in our next FA Cup game. Who knows? I mean, I think it's great that they're, as Phil mentioned on the Academy special this week, I think it's great that they're in and around the first team, getting those opportunities to train and, even having the potential carrot at the end to go, if you train well enough, you'll play a little bit in an FA Cup game. I think for Alfie, for Michael, like, playing for Chelsea in an FA Cup game has to be one of their, like, goals on their to-do list, and they both achieved that yesterday.
SofaScore's got Golding at 5'10", which again for a non-defensive player is a great height in soccer football. He is definitely more of an attack-minded midfielder, but will run box to box. I mean, look, this guy's been playing U21 football as a 17-year-old this season. He's gone to the U17 World Championship with England in November, which is why he missed so many matches. But could you imagine that? He did we talked about in the youth episode, they're doing that Premier League International Cup. So he just played Celtic and then rocks up for an FA Cup match a couple weeks later and gets minutes. Like, he's had a wild fall and was so close to getting that goal as well, like we said. So, again, just more excitement, more eyes on him, because I don't know if we've really talked about him, at least on our side, about players that have been on the bench. He's been gone. So, Poch definitely shows that him and Neil Bath and the rest of the academy are talking because they wanted him to get this opportunity. Also, we needed midfielders.
Yep.
Last one. Dan, captain, Levi Colwell. Over other experienced players, Poch seems to love the Cobham players when it comes to being captains. Did you find this interesting based on our lineup that he went with Levi? What are you kind of making of the captaincy since Chilwell and Reece James seem to be missing a lot?
I would have presumed that either Enzo or Sterling would have potentially been the captain in this match. Just, we've seen Enzo wear our man previously this season, and we've seen, like Sterling has, captained multiple times throughout his, lengthy career. But I love the fact that Pochettino is maybe assembling a little bit more of this desire for all of the team to have that leading mentality, to build that mental fortitude in the side, that they have to think about the game as a captain, to think about it as a leader on the pitch. I mean, I guess if I'm trying to come up with like the why did Poch do this versus the more senior player, Nick, that to me feels like the reasoning behind it is to really start to build an identity, to build some mental strength in the moments that these players need it. Because we've seen some poor decisions, across the pitch, across all of our players, senior and non, from Cobham, from not, over the last couple of, matches, last couple of months, that this feels like probably an indoctrination effort that Pochettino is undergoing.
Well, I think first thought is this is a much better match to roll him out as a captain than United away. I think that, maybe was a little bit too much too soon when you look back on it. Second thing, though, is like I think this shows that there's a huge amount of faith in him, right? He was just given the big new contract in the summer. This is clearly a player that everyone's identified as like, the next Reece James to roll through the academy, after, a series of really great Cobham integrations into our squad. He's like the next guy. And if you think about where he's at, really, he's like fourth choice captain, right? Now, it's not his fault that first and second choice captain are both hurt and have been hurt for a long time. And that, our third choice captain, Conor Gallagher, needs some rest. And he got some rest today, which is great. But it does instill, I think, a sense of responsibility for him moving forward as that center back role, wearing the number 26, right? Like there is, I think, here's what can happen in your career if you continue to do all the right things. You could one day be the captain of Chelsea Football Club, right? That's a big responsibility. It's a big deal. And hopefully it's something that is motivating to him, Brandon, because, again, I think everyone sees an incredible talent in there. I think there have been times where he's played incredibly well this year. I think there's times where he struggled this year, as you would expect any sort of kind of younger profile player to do in the league. But when he has these opportunities, I want to see him do what he did yesterday, close down the space, be vocal, be a leader, and he did. I think this was a relatively good performance. It was a good win. Vibes were high. That's our third win in a row, right? Which is something that I don't think we've done this year to this point. I think, this is the stretch that we were hoping to see, where you're starting to roll a few together. And so let's just hope that continues. I'm really pleased for him.
20 years old, 21 end of next month. So when you say one day you might be able to, one day before your 21st birthday, you might be able to captain Chelsea, and an FA Cup match is a great framework to play off of. So again, I just think there's a bit of a pattern here. Interesting. I wonder what the conversation maybe is with Poch and the players behind, that it's not Sterling, potentially an Enzo. Enzo's also massively young, but he's a bigger player who's won a World Cup and can carry a lot more on his shoulders. But he's going with another young player, Levi, who this is his first full season in the men's senior team at Chelsea. And that's really cool that it seems like we talk about this project and these young players. Clearly, Poch is bought in, because it would be easy for him to give it to Sterling. It'd be easy for him to not give it to Connor. They're going with these young players and like really betting heavy on them. And I think this is just another kind of like checkbox on that plan.
The average age in the squad yesterday is 23 years old.
Flat. That's crazy.
Right? And of course, Thiago doesn't start that game, but I think the oldest player in the squad is Raheem Sterling and then Disasi. Like, that's it. You have young Alfie, young Levi, young Mallow, young Enzo, young Moises, young Mikhailo, young Cole, young Armando. Like, it's it's not that far off that the 20-year-old would marshal the overall squad age of 23 forward. So it's, again, it's a really unique set of circumstances, right? We haven't been this young in a long time. Chelsea have typically been a side with a tremendous amount of experience, a couple 30-plus-year-olds in there leading the charge, someone more experienced as captain. But I can only think that this would benefit him moving forward.
Without a doubt.
It has to.
Yeah, without a doubt. And again, like Disasi's 25. Right, Raheem's
an old
29.
head. He's an old head in there, baby.
So even then, it's really like Raheem Sterling's the odd duck out on this one, and Petrovic is young as well. Where does he land at? 24. So 23 is pretty
Ancient.
crazy. What is crazy though, I think, Dan, just to put the seal on this one, is that this isn't that far off from our best lineup either. Like, if you want to potentially bring a Nico Jackson into the squad, if you want to bring an Nkunku in, that's fine. Conor Gallagher, you're not really changing the average age. Like, this is Chelsea Football Club as it stands today.
We made the case. They are a under 23 side that is playing in the Premier League, and that comes with all of the good things sometimes, like an abundance of energy and enthusiasm. It also comes with all of the bad things. And so we have to live with the reality that we're in, which is that it's a young side, inexperienced at times, and going deep in this cup run, getting to more semifinals to finals in domestic cups, potentially winning one would be the best possible thing for this side. Get them accustomed to winning, top level silverware early. It's a be wonderful, wonderful thing.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and dig into that a little bit more. We're going to take our last ad break. When we get back, again, a first half to forget, a second half to celebrate more on this one. Thank you to sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, coming out of the ad break, Nick, we have a packed week. You talked about it at the top of the episode, but we actually can shoot our shots here. Let's call them.
Look, just a casual 5-pod week. You're listening to Monday's episode right now. Dan and Sam doing a Victor Osimhen special just in case something wild and crazy happens during the January window. We will be back on Wednesday with a Boro match review for the League Cup. Thursday, Brandon and Matt back in the saddle for the Matt Law special. And then Friday, of course, Fulham match preview as we come up toward the weekend. Lots going on this week. If you are like, hey, I'm like not getting enough, or I want to see another sort of episode, you can always email us and be like, why aren't you guys talking about this, that, or the other thing? We have some special episodes coming up that are not necessarily match related as well, but we're always open to your ideas. So let us know.
All right. Well, back to the match here. At the end of the day, we got the result and we advanced. First half wasn't pretty, but it's knockout tournament football. You got to get the result done. I think, Dan, I talked about the competition earlier, and it's like if you go from usually playing at a high breakneck speed of the Premier League and you slow it down to the Championship, which is usually more physical, less technical, long ball oriented. They even changed their formation to be way more defensive. I think it's natural that you're going to struggle, right? Because it's just different. And you got to think about like the way they see the game, the way they play the game is also way different than an Everton, a Palace, a Luton. So Chelsea struggled a bit in the first half, but it never really felt like we were out of control or like on the brink of blowing it. Or did you feel concerned at times? How worried were you?
I personally was not concerned. I think I understand and empathize with the thought that like this was not fun to watch. I would agree with that. It was not a fun first half to watch because a lot of the things that we were attempting just weren't coming off. Some of the passing angles that we were trying to kind of find in those moments weren't coming to fruition. There were a couple of advances forward into the box by Sterling or Palmer. Some shots that bounced odd, didn't necessarily test the keeper maybe as fully as we would like. So we were accumulating these shots. We were accumulating these chances. It felt like the standard recipe for a disappointing day out for Chelsea. And so I would say that makes sense to me, but it's also exactly what you would want if you're Preston to do and come in is to frustrate Chelsea for as long as they possibly can, potentially get a counter, potentially get a dead ball opportunity, whether that's a set piece or a free kick near in and around the box, and just absolutely steal a goal, steal a result. So they executed their playbook exactly how they wanted to. that frustrated Chelsea. And really, there wasn't necessarily enough coming off in that first half to make you excited. But I didn't need 2 full halves of great football, Nick. I just needed the one. And I get being frustrated about like the fact that it took as long as it did, the fact that it wasn't more comfortable earlier in the match. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not accustomed to this side anymore, just being able to will a goal out of nothing. And so I understand that it's going to take time to chisel the stone to see the statue underneath. And it's just not necessarily something that is quick and easy anymore.
Yeah, it's a little bit concerning, though, when you're going to play another championship side coming up, right, and Borough for a couple of matches for the League Cup, that, this team with a week's rest, I mean, which is, again, after the festive fixture period, I expected them to be fired out of a cannon, with a week's rest and be a lot more prepared to deal with what Preston were going to throw at us. And They finally got there in the second half. They started to attack through crosses and through the width of the team. But the first half, it was like they were trying to dribble through all 11 players to get a chance on target. And it just looked woefully, the team looked woefully underprepared. The tactics weren't right. The players were in the wrong positions. And it does worry you because this is a knockout competition. You only get one chance at this. Whether the team, the players, the coaches have the right sort of mentality. Now, Preston luckily didn't make us pay for any of that in the first half. They were, just kind of out there running around. But I was pretty worried, Brendan, and with the way that we, played the first 60 minutes, it just wasn't. It wasn't what you'd hope for, to continue to build momentum, straight out of the gate. And I think the fans were rightfully kind of miffed about that as well.
I mean, I can definitely understand frustration. Like I said, I definitely stacked to the point of like, when you look at it, we were getting into the box. Preston, they were defending very oddly. How many times did we get in the box? There's so many like awkward, they would kind of put in a tackle, it would ricochet. They're really just trying to take a touch that would get through that back line. But we didn't have any threats until the second half when we started crossing, right? Everything we were doing, Nick, was vertical. Everything was straight at them, straight down the box, between the width of the 18. To that point, it was definitely not working. Love to see the changes in the second half. Got some crosses in, scored. To your point, though, we did watch a ton of chances go missing. And I said earlier, we missed 6 of our 7 big chances. The huge, I think, positive from this one, though, Dan, are the set piece goals we did score, right? Obviously, Raheem Sterling on a free kick. That was a phenomenal free kick. Clearly been practicing something like that. Scoring off a corner. Problem is, it's not like Raheem's hitting 10 free kicks in a season. We're scoring 1 out of every 3 matches from a corner. So maybe this will help boost that confidence.
It's a really interesting point, really quick, though, is like, how many times have we had a free kick in that area this season? I can count like 5 or 6. Like, it doesn't happen very often. We don't typically get fouled in that area to have those opportunities. At least that my memory can jog here. And I remember when Marcus Alonso played for us, it seemed like we had 2 or 3 of those a match where we would kind of set up and do the whole routine, Dan. And so it did kind of throw me back. Like, man, those are dangerous if you can manufacture them.
Well, I mean, there was the opportunity for Raheem to take a second one in the game where Reece James took it. And, that was also the game where he got his first free kick goal of the season. So, I mean, yes, it is beneficial that we are making use of opportunities that should net you at least a shot on target at minimum and should then likely lead to some type of goal. I think that we are still not as comprehensively good in those dead ball moments on those corners. I actually think it was one of the good bits of commentary during the game was they highlighted that Thiago Silva on the moving of the wall was very helpful in making sure that like the line, the view for the goalkeeper was completely obstructed so that he did not have an easy time reading the flight of the ball. Like, those are the things that I think we just need at an overall level, some type of set piece coach, some type of individual who is primarily focused on that, who's a specialist in that area, would wield some real net positive outcomes, Brandon. Because I think ultimately, like, that would be, if we could do this multiple times, like, hey, one every other game or one, once per game, like, that would be a much better trend line to operate off of than the kind of randomness that we're getting from this right now.
Obviously, this is our first match in the FA Cup, so there's really no stats on it. In the EFL Cup, Carabao, we have 0 free kick goals from 1 free kick, and in the Premier League, it's 1 from 13. So to your point, Nick, we could go look at what the other teams are, but 13 total. That's definitely less than one match, and probably, a lot closer to every other match or even getting a free kick shot opportunity to play there. Jackson obviously now gone until, February at some point. Interesting on this one, Nick. 3 weeks ago, no one cares. 2 weeks ago, okay, now we care again. He scored. It's like he has been really inconsistent, but is the top goal scorer on the team. Thoughts, like, how big of a miss was he? Broya today had scored, but I think people were looking for a little bit more. The last match, Broya was more of a decoy, we talked about, we felt like. What are your thoughts on Jackson being missing in terms of this team scoring goals?
Look, I would rather have him here than not. Let's just be straightforward in what we're going to say. Like, I'd rather he be here and be an option. I think that, we were kind of chatting with, in the WhatsApp group during the game, that it did not seem as if Broya was totally locked in until, kind of a few minutes before the goal, where we started to figure out how to attack that team and he started to get in better positions. I thought he played a really good, 30 minutes there in the second half where he was in dangerous positions. Probably could have had a hat trick if the ball bounces right for him yesterday in that second half. And so for me, what's worrying, and we'll talk about this in the next segment, is the Nkunku injury, right? Because if he's out for any period of time, you're really just relying on Broya, which puts a hell of a workload on him. We have 5 more matches this month, with the additional FA Cup game, the League Cup game, Fulham, and Liverpool. So this is, it's potentially a huge workload. But I think what I saw is a player that adapted to the situation, scored his chance, like, got us off the board, and started playing much better football in the second half when it looked pretty bad for 60 minutes. I'm curious, Dan, if he begins to get more acclimated to the way his teammates play, because he's been so sparsely used this year, and if his performances begin to pick up because he has a better understanding with, Mudryk crossing the ball in, what that looks like versus Cole Palmer crossing it in versus, potentially Raheem Sterling playing balls, in behind, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he has, made, I guess, some appearances, but again, it's not necessarily, like, it is a run of 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Like, he, has made an appearance in all of those last couple of matches, whether or not that was there was 3 starts out of those, and then 2 substitute appearances, 1 for 16 minutes, 1 for 20 minutes. And so I think you would argue at about 400 or so minutes across all competitions. Like, that's not necessarily a whole lot of game time, but I mean, he is the guy. He is the option right now. If Nkunku, who we'll talk about shortly, is not necessarily 100% ready to go, like, he will likely start against Middlesbrough in midweek. Like, that would be something to consider. He might get an opportunity to start against Fulham, and those are opportunities that he should look to be taking advantage of. I mean, when he was playing for Southampton, he got just under 2,000 minutes in that season when he was on loan, 6 goals before obviously he got injured. So I mean, that definitely put him in a bad shape there. But it'll be really interesting to see if that chemistry can develop, if he can find some consistency. If people could continue, like Malo Gusto, to cross the ball into the top of his head and just let him fire him in from there, I'm okay with that too, because that totally works. That was a I'm in the right spot. I just need somebody to set me up. It's like basketball, right? Like the alley-oop, right? I just need the ball in the right area, and I'll put it in the net. And that's exactly what he did.
Goals, goals, goals. We cannot forget how much we struggled there. So whoever's ready to step up, come on down. We are ready. One of the things that is becoming a bigger concern across the club are these injuries. But not only that, it's like playing injured players, right? And that are causing more injuries. Yeah. Lavia made his debut, left injured, have not seen since. That is like the big one. The worst news ever from the women's camp, the warm weather training, and Sam Kerr out with an ACL. The injuries we've talked about all season, right? I've asked Matt Law, we've asked Naz multiple times, what's going on at the medical department? No one will really say anything. Yet again, we're playing Enzo, who has been limited minutes because of this hernia. Malagusto goes full 90, and he's our only fit fullback. These are concerns, right? Nkunku injured after training. So I guess Nick, go ahead. With the balance of this, like we're checking lineups going, oh God, who's on this sheet? Are they going to finish the match healthy? We didn't make subs. These guys are playing essentially full matches. We're on a knife's edge right now.
Yeah, it's really scary, honestly, because it's not just the injuries, right? The injuries, Nkunku we'll talk about next, but like it's the knock-on effects of having to play players more than you would have played them because you don't have a like-for-like sub to bring in their place for 30 minutes, right? But I think yesterday was the first forced rest that Gallagher's had all season. Like, I mean, it's crazy. It's honestly fucking crazy to think about. And, you think about the knock-on effect of Broya potentially having to play 6-7 matches in a row when he hasn't played all year and what that does for him. Maybe it plays him into full fitness. Maybe he's feeling as strong and healthy as ever. Or maybe it puts him in the red zone again, right, where he's more likely to get injured. Same with Caicedo. You really worry about the midfield right now. Enzo's not fully fit. Caicedo's been on fumes. Gallagher's been on fumes. You have no other, except for academy players, maybe Andre Santos, although that seems not likely that he's going to play a role this season for Chelsea. Like, it just, the whole thing is really concerning to me, Dan. And, like, it's not just about the 10 or now 11 players that are on the injury list. It's about the knock-on effects to everyone who has to do extra duty in their stead.
Yeah, every player who's out injured, and this I think ties back to the conversation we've been having about the suspensions through cards. Through card accumulation. Like, we can't afford to miss players for stupid reasons when we're missing so many players for actual legitimate injury
Medical
concerns.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was wondering how we were going to differentiate those two.
Versus the impromptu stomach bug. Look, ultimately, it's just a matter of making sure that we come to some solution for it. You would imagine that this is has to be on the top of the sporting directors and the club's list of things to take care of, because ultimately, like, if in venture capital, like, investments, protecting your investment is a very important thing. The contracts for these players are a part of that investment, and repeat injury, long-term injury is not good for their investment in the players, their investment in the club, the return potentially on the investment. And so I think just from that view of it, like, we don't necessarily view it as an investment. We view it as supporters, as our club and as our fandom. And we are just wanting the players to be healthy so that Chelsea can be the most competitive team across all competitions that they're in. It will be interesting to see, though. I think this relates to some of the fatigue we've seen. I do think Poch, could he have said, hey, we're up 3-0. I'm going to risk, maybe putting someone on a little bit earlier. Like, that could have been a question. So, ultimately, these are things where, like, yes, the club has some control. Poch does also have some control, too. And finding the appropriate balance in the game state to say, hey, I can take the risk pulling off a player, putting on Silva, right? Like, yes, he gets a goal. Yes, he kind of organizes it. Like, getting Silva minutes of rest this season is going to be important. Getting, Levi, who has not had a ton of rest, would be an opportunity too. So like, it's going to be really interesting to watch, Brandon. I think we'll just have to keep an eye on it to see how the club and Poch tackles this.
Well, of course. Are they going to, as you look to the transfer window, are they going to stick with what they have, knowing, to your point, the assets, the players, they got the ones they wanted. We're obviously not going to win the league. We're obviously not going to get in the Champions League. Do you just keep the cohesive unit, try to get to the end of the season, get as many people healthy so you start next season fresh? Who knows? But again, Nick, we had another step back with Nkunku getting injured allegedly after training. Maybe he was working too hard on some stuff on his own. And now we're at conflicting reports of 3 weeks out or ready for Middlesbrough/Fulham, which has completely set fans in all sorts of directions. So the bigger problem is most dangerous goal scoring threat, especially with Jackson out, now injured, return date TBD.
Yeah, it's a real bummer because, to replace Jackson, you're using Armando Broja, who's coming off his own injury, and Christopher Nkunku is coming off of his injury. I think most of us realized heading into January that it would be, a combination of those guys to take us over the line and get it until we can get Jackson back, assuming that he comes back healthy, knock on wood.
Great. Forgot about that. Love international football.
Yep. And so there's real risk right now. I mean, this is potentially, Dan said on the knife earlier, like this is a real problem. I think you could, in this instance, if Nkunku is out for 3 weeks, which basically takes you to the end of January, maybe Jackson comes back or whatever. But like, I think you probably see Cole Palmer play a false nine if we can't, play Armando Broja up top for, too many consecutive matches, and you're not going to have Nkunku as an option up there. We've seen Raz play a false nine before. It didn't really work. I don't know if any of our other profiles of forwards outside of Cole Palmer really work as a false nine. And so it's probably the case where you're pushing someone like Gallagher or Enzo up into the number 10 spot and flanking him with Raz, Madueke, Mudryk, and then playing Palmer as kind of the link between all those players and looking to get in behind from a wide perspective, kind of like we did against Arsenal when he played that role. And so I'm worried about this flat out. I really am, because I think the last thing that we need right now is another injury setback for Nkunku that puts more time between him and the pitch, and then putting a ton of that pressure on Broja to be the only legitimate striker that we have at the club. So tough spot for everyone to be in.
Crucial is what you could even say, Dan. Big overarching problems. There's a lot of balancing act. This is why the season's not going from strength to strength. There's always something interfering with our progress, with our consistency.
Yeah, no, this is not the bullet train from start of the season to success. This is the bus, your regular city bus making 20 stops to go 2 miles. Like, this is a pretty slow and laborious process to get from point A to point Z, as our friends across the pond would say. And so ultimately, like, I do feel like we've seen conflicting reports with the Nkunku piece. Like, he might be available for Middlesbrough, he might be available for Fulham. I do think then it becomes a question of how much do you want to risk him, knowing that you do have to bridge the remainder of the month with another FA Cup match, with a Liverpool match, who they might likely be without Mo Salah. So that is a positive on our end as well. So like there are benefits to the subtractions that we're facing, because other teams are also facing those. But getting through this period, deciding if you want to go in and get a stopgap solution, I don't know. Like, I've looked at the market. Sam and I have looked at the market to try to evaluate who Chelsea could bring in this January. And it's not a lot of good options. And January is the overpay period. We've seen this before. We've been victims of it very recently in terms of having to pay more than maybe the market value of a player to get a deal done in this period. And so, I think Chelsea will hopefully be smart about this and try to feel like they can make a long-term decision. But part of that will be is if we are advancing into cup finals, if we are advancing in the cup, like, that will probably put us a little less in the panic button scenario heading into the end of the month.
Well, there's a lot that's going to be happening in January. Again, I've already prepped Matt, all right? I told Matt we're not talking about anything but transfers this month, so buckle up, big guy. He said he's ready. So we'll talk all transfers with him. Obviously, Nick did with Naz. So if you want to go get ahead of that, go check out the pod feed. Just so everyone's on the same page, the draw for the Emirates FA Cup 4th round will be broadcast on Monday, the 8th of January. I believe it'll be right before or after the match. There is one on Monday, so we'll know more then. But there's a lot of replays that have to happen. Before we get to that, though, Dan in the match, look, it happens, Dan. Don't worry about it.
Look, it was con drafts.
It happens.
Look, I'm busy packing boxes to move, man.
Whoa,
Like
whoa.
I don't know what to tell you. I should have
Nick.
used some Bing X cryptocurrency to buy someone to come in to help me out with that. But look, I think it was probably Malo Gusto, personally. But Raheem Sterling was Sofa Scores man of the match with a 9.8 out of 10. I don't know if I fully
Hard to
agree
beat.
with that. I think it was Gusto.
Interesting.
Gusto is a 7-3 from SofaScore too, so a bit of a drop. Enzo 8-1. He would have been your second place person, but those are just numbers, Nick.
Yeah, I think Sterling got the official man of the match, right? So
I'm sure, yeah.
So I'm fine with that. I'm fine if Sterling gets it.
All right, look, other results, there are a ton. I'm not going to go through all of these because it's literally on multiple pages. It's a big round, right? There's a lot of wins, a couple upsets, like everyone said. If anything, you talk about shithouse moment, Nick. The fact that Sunderland decked out their club's pub for Newcastle with Newcastle slogans, I thought that was pretty hilarious. They are bitter rivals. They are in the same city,
What is happening?
I don't know.
The
magic of the cup.
I expected
Nick,
that to be
can we get a
war.
what are we even doing here from you?
What are we even doing here, guys? Look, I think I expected that to be a full-on war, and it was just a slap fight, and Newcastle just buried them. And first time they had played in 8 years, I think,
Wow.
or something. I think that was the stat. I could be wrong, but obviously they've been in different divisions for a long time, and you only would then get the cups to potentially meet up, and that's what it is. That's a blood rival. That, those two hate each other. That's like United Liverpool. That's Chelsea Tottenham. That's we would never deck out Frankie's for the Spurs fans.
Exactly.
What? That's crazy.
It was. Patrick Bamford, former Blue, taking a long ball off his chest, turning and smashing, had no business doing that. So Leeds beating Peterborough 3-0. Wrexham, Ryan Reynolds' favorite team, advancing. So the U.S. audience will be clearly engaged. Other than that, Liverpool beating Arsenal 2-0 today. Manchester United and Wigan are the last match of the round, but at least 5 replays already with Everton and Crystal Palace making their lives more difficult unnecessarily. Wolves Brentford as well.
Yeah, Maidstone, I think, is the lowest ranked team left in the competition. They beat Stevenage 1-0. So huge shout outs to them. We talk about the madness and the magic of the FA Cup. It's all that sort of stuff that makes it fun and interesting. And look, one shout because they're coming up. Middlesbrough gave Villa a hell of a game yesterday. This is not going to be an easy team. I think Michael Carrick, in charge of Middlesbrough, by all accounts, doing an incredible job. So we gotta be aware for that cup competition. I don't think they're gonna go quietly into the good night.
Yep, and that's exactly what we have on the 9th. Only 2 days off before we're back playing again. Chelsea fans, do not rest. But to wrap up here, like I said, the draw is taking place on Monday. We are ball number 25. Look, Dan, the goal is to avoid Premier League competition again as we advance. I wouldn't even be able to tell you who some of the smallest teams are other than Nick telling me that Maidstone are the lowest remaining. So anyone bottom half of championship or below is pretty much what you would hope to see.
And that's the weekend of the 27th, I think.
That's correct. That would be placed in between, our second round, our second match, second leg of the Middlesbrough, and our match against Liverpool at the end of the month. So it would add one more fixture before the end of January. Because why not? Because we don't have any international breaks this month. We have international breaks starting next month. So, like, let's just pack in a couple extra here now.
December was slow, so they're catching up, making up for lost time, no doubt.
Slow.
All right. Well, hey,
Okay.
hope you've all enjoyed it. FA Cup magic. We're back. We're advancing. Win and move on. That's the theme for this one. A second domestic cup trophy. I guess cup and trophy are a little bit synonymous. Probably could have just skipped one, but hey, we got a lot of pods. We got a lot of pods this week coming up. I'm just trying to rest. Guys, it was great to chat with you. Listeners, again, if you want to get more involved and just find your Chelsea community Discord, again, the biggest way to go do that. We're going to continue to stay hot with, like I said, another 5-pod week. January is here. So any way you can help support us and grow it is big. Any final thoughts from either one of you?
Beat Middlesbrough.
Keep it simple. KISS method. All right, Chelsea fans, that's going to do it from us. So until next time, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.